All right, so gentlemen, thanks for joining us today for Leadership Log, which is a podcast for the Air Force Lifecycle Management Center community on items of relevance. And in this time of COVID-19, one item of relevance is remote working, to telework from home. And so we're talking with some gentlemen who came up with an innovative solution to do just that using a tool that's fundamental in the contracting world. So Mr. Olson, why don't you introduce yourself to our listeners and give us kind of an overview of what the problem that you solved was.
Sure. My name is Jay Olson, and I work at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base for LCMC and the Plans and Operations branch, which is basically the contract automation shop for Wright-Patterson. And our office supports Conwright, which is the weapons system world and R&D world as well, contract writing system. And we also support ConIT, which is the wave of the future with contract writing systems for the Air Force. So we're in the process of transitioning from Conwright to ConIT, and part of our issue at the moment, and has been since 1997, is that Conwright is a legacy contract writing system that a few folks here at Wright-Pat had created back then, and that was really never intended to do what we're doing with it today. And so if you think about it, in 1997, we had people dialing up through AOL to get to the internet with the 28K, 56K modems. And I don't think that anybody would have ever imagined at that point in time where the government would actually issue laptops to personnel to take home, and that they would have multiple monitors that they could hook up, and that they could use broadband internet to connect. I just don't think that teleworking was part of the calculus back in the late 90s. And so we've had a long-standing problem with Conwright, because it's only possible to use Conwright, or it had been only possible to use Conwright on an Air Force installation, wired up through NIPRNet. So what I found out about back in October is that some of our counterparts at Hanscom, Mr. Ken Layer and Leo Rodriguez, they both had come up with a solution that's really kind of helped us rethink about how we're going to approach telework, and also help enable multiple solutions rather, that will help us reach a goal of being able to compete with other organizations, other agencies that are allowing telework, and also helping us get through this crisis. So maybe we might be able to spend a minute to give to Ken and to Leo to kind of talk about the solution that they had, and then talk about how we've also built on that.
Okay, but if I could add just one point before we go on, explain to people who are not contracting officers, what is Conwright, what's the purpose of it, and what does it do? Why is it important?
Sure. Conwright is it's basically an automation software suite that allows for automation of building contracts. So what it does is it keeps us compliant with laws and regulations and various different policies that we have to make compliant contracts, high quality contracts. It makes it possible for us to trade contract data with various different partners, whether that's through industry and through our other DoD offices that do administration for contracts and payment contracts. So really, it's a very great suite that has been put together, and they've built on it over the last 20 plus years to be able to make it so that we can not have to write contracts in Microsoft Word alone, and have to go through the whole body of knowledge for contracting every single time we create a document.
Yep. Okay. All right. So, Mr. Layer, let's go to you then. What was your involvement in this, or how did it get started?
So here at Hanscom, Mr. Leo Rodriguez, before I came on as chief, had been looking for ways to enable telework, as that's been a big push at Hanscom Air Force Base to allow folks to telework, to save that commute, be a little bit more productive. But the issue with Conwright is that you can't VPN into it, you can't connect remotely into it. It causes a lot of corruption in the database and the system. Eventually it'll cause it to crash. And so that wasn't feasible to work from home for most contracting folks. So Leo Rodriguez looked into this private commercial software hardware solution It's called a Moby key, and it is essentially a little CAC card reader that will tunnel into your work computer. So you can, on your home computer, plug this little CAC card in, and or this little CAC card reader in, and it'll go right to your work computer. And then everything that you're doing is being done from your work computer, even though you're driving it from your home computer. It's very neat. It's very interesting. And it allows the Conwright to work because now your work computer is on the Air Force network. It's on the same network as the Conwright server, avoids the crashing, allows folks to telework. And again, Leo Rodriguez, I'll toss it to him because he found this commercial solution, worked with the company Route 1 to bring it over to the Air Force. It had been in use with the Navy and the Army previously. And he did that initial research this past summer of 2019. So I'll pass it to him because he's got more of the history, the background, and the research into bringing this great tool over to Hanscom Air Force Base.
My name's Leo Rodriguez. I'm a IT specialist here in Hanscom. My duty is to manage the Conwright database here and maintain it. So back in the summer of 2019, it was brought to my attention that the Moby key, I was told there were several organizations that already had used it, and if it would be possible for me to see if it would work with Conwright. So I went out, I did some research. I reached out to Route 1, which is the maker of the Moby key, and worked with Arcom Squadron to see if we can get one or two to test out. So we basically brought one on. I tested it, made sure that it was what I was told it was, that it was a remote solution, which ahead of time I already knew it should work for our issues with Conwright based on how Conwright works and what the issues we had with it prior of why we couldn't work remotely with it. Tested it out, make sure it was up to what we needed, and it definitely was. So slowly we started phasing it out to Hanscom, and word got around like fire. All the bases were called again, trying to find out what it was, how we got it to work, what steps we had to take to procure it. And then now with COVID-19, all the bases started reaching out even more, and eventually LCMC reached out to push it out to all Conwright sites. And I know here at Hanscom, I think half of our Conwright workforce is already on it, and I know several bases have already pushed it out. And it's definitely been a life changer, especially now during COVID-19. Without it, I don't know what we would be doing to write contracts.
Can we talk about that for a second? Because I might be able to shed some insight into what we would, or at least what we at Wright-Pat would be doing if we didn't have a remote solution of some sort. So I went to Costa Rica at the very beginning of March before we really had any stay-at-home orders or anything come into play, and I got home on the 11th, and I didn't really know what was going on. I wasn't watching the news. I was at the beach, right? And as soon as I get home, everything was very clearly starting to change. And so I'd spent that entire weekend writing up a, oh no, what do we do kind of plan for everybody at Wright-Patterson to say, this is our continuity of operations plan. And so we have one in place, but but it's really been focused on tornadoes and hurricanes and that kind of thing. And this is a very different type of crisis to anticipate. So we had to put in a couple more details. So this is kind of what we're avoiding by having a remote solution is since Conwright is a client server system, meaning that we have all the databases that are stored on the server, and then the Conwright application is on a user's computer, and it has a local database that has to do a lot of the local processing with the application that feeds back to the server. What we had to do is come up with a plan to be able to move out very quickly to make it so that everybody that is absolutely mission essential could be able to operate Conwright without using the server at all. So essentially making a computer that a user is using both the client and the server. So what that would have done had we actually needed to do that without having a solution like MobiKey or an RDP, which we'll talk about in a little bit, is it would have made it so that we would have essentially had 1 or 2 people in each office, if we were lucky, being able to operate Conwright. So all the work from an entire office would have to funnel through a single computer and a single focal point to make operations keep going. And that required a ton of prep work. And so basically right after I got back from Costa Rica, we didn't have a sure thing yet with the solution that we deployed at Wright-Patterson. So we went through and trained all the senior management, all low level management, all the different tacticians that would have had to have been involved, our own office. And it was a monumental effort just to get everybody ready to be able to run Conwright on standalone computers. And then we were also working this other solution in parallel. But I bring that to you because I want to just convey a little bit of what was avoided by having remote solutions. It was absolutely incredible.
Okay, and let's talk a little bit, Mr. Newsom, I want to bring you into the conversation about a solution. So at the same time Hanscom was looking at the MobiKey solution, you came up with a different idea for Wright-Pat.
Yeah, Robert Newsom, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. I'm IT specialist, also with the Conwright application, trying to keep the databases and stuff maintained and operational. In the private sector, I was able to use remote desktop connection or remote desktop protocol, we call RDP, across the VPN connection to gain access to other computers that I was authorized to use, just so I could use them remotely. That got me testing after Leo and Ken had mentioned the MobiKey and how it worked. I was doing some research on base, and I was able to use remote desktop connection from one computer to another while on base. So it got me thinking, is it possible to do it across the VPN? At the time, testing on the old SSL VPN would not allow us to see other computers on base across the VPN, only servers. So that sort of halted what I was trying to accomplish. Mm-hmm. And around the mid-March timeframe, Big F5 released the new Urim VPN client and got me thinking, hey, I wonder if they've opened that capability up. So I tested it one more time, and it was a success, which really opened the door for RDP solution.
And talk to us about the advantage of doing that then, and kind of what the labor savings, because there's some labor savings involved in that as well, correct?
There is. Well, it's more of a cost savings. If you've got the extra equipment already available, you can just enable the RDP solution on those extra equipment that you have in stock and allow a group of users to use those computers as a solution instead of using the MobiKey, instead of having to purchase a device and a subscription.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, Mr. Olson, you talked about kind of the results of things or the amount of work that would have been required had we not had a remote solution. So, I mean, that's really, it was going to be possible to do, but it would have been really onerous, correct?
Absolutely. Not only would it have been, well, it was onerous, to be honest, over the first few days there when we really, when our governor issued a stay-at-home order, and just before that was we were kind of seeing the writing on the wall. We had upped a massive training effort. We had really gotten everything into place in the need that, in the case that we would need that. But also on the back end. So say that all these contracts were awarded from standalone computers, meaning that we reconfigured everything. It would have been a massive reconfiguration to get back to client server and to also bring all those contracts that had been awarded or modified or created on a standalone machine to integrate that back into our production environment on the server. That would have been hundreds of hours, if not thousands of hours of reconciliation, of bringing everything back, especially now, because when we started doing that, my thought was that this would last 2 weeks, maybe.
Yeah, right.
And now we're what, approaching month 3 pretty much more. So we're getting to the point where this has become more of a prolonged thing, and I see as we're in the phase 1 posture that we call it, where this is likely to continue for some time, that I can only imagine, and I don't want to imagine really, how much of a reconciliation effort it would have been on the back end to bring everything back to production.
And the end story is that had we done it the other way, that kind of the heavy lift workaround, productivity, there's no way we would have maintained the same level of productivity to a non-teleworking situation. But the truth is that with these remote solutions, we have been able to maintain our productivity. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I at least at Wright-Patterson, we're right there 100%. I don't think that we've lost anything. And we've been monitoring the metrics, and so far as I can tell, we're lined up with where we were last year at this time. So all indications are that we're running on all cylinders, even under telework posture, which is quite incredible if you think about it. The fact that we were able to, as a workforce, be able to get everybody on the same sheet of music and get everybody mobilized so quickly, and get everybody trained, and so I will say that this doesn't just come on its own, right? It wasn't just, and it's still not a set and forget type of thing. We have our regular office is supporting the users out there every day with different issues and questions that come up to keep them running. And I imagine that Ken's office is doing the same exact thing in terms of keeping things moving. So I mean, a big thank you goes out to all those folks as well on our help desk that are keeping it moving. But yes, that is absolutely right here, especially Wright-Patterson, and I'm assuming everywhere else that everything is still running just as if we were normally in the office.
Yeah, so this is Ken Lair again, the Chief of Automation at Hanscom. So yeah, as a matter of fact, our productivity, we looked at the numbers and we're not statistically significant from last year at this time. There's no statistically significant difference. And to kind of put it in different terms of how Jay said, if you had everybody working on their own client server on their own computer, working with their own contract, some of our contracts are so large that we have a team of, say, 5 to 10 people working on one very large contract, making orders off of the same contract, modifying the same contract. And if you were to let those folks all go out in the field with their own client server Conwright, doing, continuing to do their work, doing their mods, doing their business, and then having to integrate it later, that would be like telling those same 10 people to go build a house and then, hey, we'll meet up and we'll put all of our pieces together at the end of the month and let's see if it fits. It's very complicated. It gets to be a very big problem, and being able to work concurrently with these remote solutions is what we need to function as an Air Force acquisition unit. Just these contracts are they're big, they're complicated, they're difficult. It's not as simple as just a small contract for say, doing a walkway or something like that. We're buying, multi-million-dollar weapon systems. So that was a monumental challenge. And for us, the work, our volume of work with the MobiKey has stayed consistent. We have a few more folks complaining about VPN and remote solutions, so that adds a little bit. But we're able to work through those complaints as well and work through those work tickets. And again, our volume is staying consistent. It's impressive. It's very neat. Something else about the MobiKey that I'd like to touch on that I think was very interesting. So it's a hardware software solution, but the hardware piece is back ordered as the COVID-19 situation really, as Jay said, I think once it became apparent that it was going to be a long-term crisis, everybody, pretty much every sister organization of the Air Force went out and bought as many of these as they could. The Navy did a bulk buy. I think Navy bought 3,000, which wiped out Route 1's stock of them in an instant. So the hardware is back ordered until I think July, August of this year. Mm-hmm. So something that Leo did, knowing that, was he worked with Route 1 to essentially work a software solution so you can bring your CAC-enabled keyboard that the Air Force already owns home, plug it into your work computer, and start going and working without having to wait for these big backlogs, which again was just a force multiplier. I could leave that to Leo, the details of what he did there, but he really leaned forward, worked with this contractor. He identified this gap, was able to use his private world experience that he brought to the Air Force and really apply a solution for us that has been, again, awesome. Not without its faults, but it's certainly closing the gap that COVID has brought.
Yeah, Mr. Rodriguez, talk to us about that.
So basically, we were on a meeting one day, and one of the other bases had said that they had reached out to order some, I forgot what base it was, and they basically mentioned the back order and said, yeah, we can't get them till June or July or something like that. And at first, I didn't know that was going on, so it was a phone meeting. So I told Ken, I'll be right back. And I went to another conference room, and I got on my cell phone and called Route 1. And I essentially was talking to their point of contact over there. And it was just a conversation basically telling them, well, if this Fusion 3 device, which is the device we have, that's essentially the smart card reader. I told them that, I was like, if it's a smart card reader with this embedded software, why can't we just make a software, modify the software to where it doesn't need the Fusion 3 device to operate? You can make it downloadable, and the users could use their own CAC reader that we provide here. So after a few weeks, I think he brought it up to their CIO. He approved it. They worked it. Then I tested it with multiple CAC readers, saw that it worked. I reached back to them. It was a back and forth between me and them, making sure it all worked. And they eventually pushed it out. So then sites that would have had to wait till July or whenever these devices were back on market, now they could take their readers home from work that we already have, even their keyboards, which have embedded readers on them, and use MobiKey just like with the device.
So can I put something on top of that, if you don't mind? Because I think that Leo really did a great service for the entire Air Force with this, and in getting the approvals necessary to make it so that MobiKey is usable. And not only within the Hanscom community, but beyond. So not only did he, get it working there at Hanscom, but he was really instrumental in working with AFMC to make it so that we could propagate the solution, or that they could propagate the solution outside of the walls of Hanscom. So Robert and our folks worked on a package as well, because when we first heard about MobiKey back in the fall time frame, it wasn't available to use at Wright-Patterson yet. It hadn't been approved. But as soon as COVID-19 came along, Leo and folks at AFMC, they just really ushered this through and got it approved at very high levels to make it so that it was possible. On top of the capacity constraints and on top of everything else technically challenging in terms of scaling up and getting users to use this, it was quite a feat that he'd accomplished on that. So I want to make sure that everybody knows that it wasn't necessarily something that we could just snap our fingers on. There was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears going into that. And likewise with RDP, when we set that up, we were working the standalone solution, but Robert in parallel was working, all hours of the night. I mean, there were 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, he was working on trying to set up the pharma computers that people would remote into to set it up. And Robert, how long did that take? What, a day or 2, 3 maybe at the most, to get 100 machines up that people could start to share and build it? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I had that basically set up over the course of about 3 days. I've done some research on a couple of test machines, wrote a couple of scripts, tested them to make sure that it would actually do what I wanted it to do, and then found a farm of computers that we own for our organization, scanned them to make sure they were still online on base, and then run those scripts against them, which enabled RDP for them. And then we ended up making a reservation spreadsheet for SharePoint, which worked to get it out the door. And then later we came up with a calendar reservation schedule where that really has kicked off. And as of today, at around 9 o'clock, there's been close to 3,000 reservations.
That's great. Yeah, Robert really did a great job in leading our team at Wright-Patterson, not just at Wright-Patterson, by the way. So Leo and Ken really propagated MobiKey throughout a lot of the Air Force, and AFMC helped get devices and software to many different locations other than Wright-Patterson. And Robert worked with other locations within LCMC, so Eglin and Gunter, to get set up with the solution that he'd come up with. And it was quite incredible to see how quickly we were able to scale this to thousands of people to be able to keep continuity working.
Yeah, so for Mr. Newsom and Mr. Rodriguez, I think I'd like to hear, what are your thoughts about the fact that here it is, you heard about a problem on your own, you figured out a solution, and now you see this solution being rolled out, and look at the, you know, the results are in the stats. It shows that we're producing, even despite being under telework for this period of time. It's got to be a sense of satisfaction to know that an idea that you had actually panned out and is being adopted across the board. Mr. Rodriguez, let's go to you first.
Yeah, it feels really good. Makes me happy. I mean, that's why I'm in IT. I love what I do. So when, ideas you think of or actually work and help people, it actually makes you feel really good.
Mr. Newsom?
I agree with Leo. I, by nature, am a troubleshooter, problem solver. So I really enjoy finding issues that really doesn't have a solution and trying to think outside of the box and make them work. It really does give me a sense of satisfaction to know that something that I thought of actually is being used in production. It makes me feel good.
And I got to imagine it's satisfying to know that your colleagues, fellow PK operators, would have had to endure a lot of extra labor without these solutions.
Oh, definitely.
Yep.
And I would also say to Mr. Olson and Mr. Lair, it speaks well of you guys as leaders to know that when someone brings a solution to you, you give a shot and you roll it out. And you try to give them a chance to prove the mettle, so to speak. Yeah,
absolutely. And not only the satisfaction of knowing that others are using it and saving man hours and that kind of thing, and saving trouble later down the road, but we're also keeping people healthy. And we're keeping people healthy, and we're keeping warfighters equipped. And I think that both of those, man hours aside, okay, whatever. But the fact that we're able to handle both of those and keep it going is incredible. And I will say, this didn't come without hesitation on my part. We were rolling this out in the throes of a very big set of unknowns, right, as this crisis was happening. But Robert was insistent, and I told him to prove it to me, and he did. So that was pretty cool. And I imagine that Ken can say something similar.
Yeah, so I would say the same thing. I'm sure Jay's relationship with Robert is similar to this, but Leo's one of those guys that when he encounters a problem with the Air Force network or the Air Force IT systems, he comes at it with, how can we fix this? And we've done this in the private world. Why can't we do that here? And it's great. So he'll come in and say, hey, I've got X problem. Could we fix it this way? Could I try it this way? And just giving him the go ahead to go do what you do best. It's awesome. And then he always figures out a solution. There's times when we're working through the Conrate databases and he'll ask me the contracting side of things and then come back with a viable solution to make things just that much better. The MobiKey is but one of these things that he has done. And having these guys that love what they do, that, are experts in their field and are just kind of born problem solvers, it's awesome. They are that force multiplier that we need. And for me, it's neat. It's like watching the, if you've ever seen The Matrix and there's a guy watching all the characters on screen and it's just letters and numbers. That's what it's like watching Leo work. Is he just jumps in there and goes bananas and just gets things done in such an efficient way. And it's neat to see these guys work. It fills me with pride. I couldn't, none of us PK guys could really jump in and do that IT stuff, but seeing these guys do it to help us out, it's awesome. It is one of those things that it really makes a difference, and makes me happy to work with these guys.
All I can say to that is ditto. These guys are natural problem solvers, and it is pretty incredible. And A6 even has done incredible things to make all this happen as well through what they've done. I know that VPN still isn't perfect, but if you compare VPN today versus what it was in January, oh my gosh, we have moved light years ahead. And so just all the work that's being done across the entire IT community. I'm a contracting officer by trade, right? So all of this, I'm just watching in amazement to see how a bureaucracy and an organization this big can just they're solving problems. The Roberts and the Leos of the world are doing incredible things that are making it so everybody else can take it for granted, But that's a great luxury to have.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like they've got that spirit, and actually marries up right now. Contracting and acquisition in general is trying to be more agile, more fluid in their acquisition processes, and trying to ask, well, why not? And let's figure out how we can get past a barrier. And, having our support folks also mirror that attitude, you can see that it's enabling us to do great things despite this great adversity of this COVID situation and everything else we run into, and having that kind of fusion of well, why can't we do that? Let's try to do that. It's the perfect time for it, and it's the perfect attitude to have right now. And it's like we're firing on all cylinders, and it is great, especially considering.
Well, gentlemen, I really appreciate your time today, joining us for Leadership Log. I think it's great to share stories like this. Sometimes it seems like we need to look at other places to find innovation, and really the innovation is already here. It's already with us. So I appreciate your time today, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.